I'm Teresa Mangum. I'm, for a couple more months, the director of the Obermann Center for Advanced Studies here at the university. And we are so grateful to have a grant, a special additional grant. We report to the Vice President for Research. And we secured a grant for them to do an environmental program. And so whenever we do one program, I start thinking about ways to stretch those dollars. So we're doing several things, and they include bringing in two of the most visionary people I know when it comes to building learning labs on campuses. And you'll get to hear from them today. I want to start by quickly thanking my staff at the Obermann Center, Lauren Cox, who's here, Jenna Hamrich, and Erin Hackathorn, who did all the arrangements and did so beautifully. And I also want to thank the advisory committee that helped us plan these events. They consist of Nick Benson, Lauren Cox, E. Cram, Stratus Giancouris, Brandy Jansen, Shannon Rossler, and Adele Van Arsdale, our campus planner. We invited our guests today in part to prepare us for a design thinking project development lab that we're going to hold next weekend, next Friday, thanks to the funding from the VPR. We have 5 teams. You can come back over here now, kind of. We have 5 teams that will work with a design expert to explore ways to use the campus and surrounding areas as a living lab for faculty, staff, and student research projects. I wanted to begin the process of that workshop next week by providing some high-powered inspiration for the teams, but also the rest of us, with a vision of what Living Labs research and teaching can be when it's imagined creatively, dedicated both to excellence and to social change for a more just and healthy future, and pursued with a collaborative spirit and force of nature level determination. We could not have asked for 2 better examples. I'll go ahead and introduce both of our speakers and then let them share what their amazing projects. Kathleen Socolofsky began her career in education before she moved on to museum studies and public garden design. She now brings that wonderfully diverse and cross-disciplinary career preparation together as the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Director of the University of California, Davis Arboretum and Public Garden, i.e. the campus. Among her many extraordinary feats in convincing faculty, staff, students, and community partners to tell the story of UC Davis and higher education through gardens, she's co-developed 3 initiatives, among many others, that are being used as models for universities and public gardens across the United States and beyond. And we'll be hearing about some of these today. One is a Gateways Project, Gardens, Arts, and the Environment Project. Another is the UC Davis Living Landscape Adaptation Plan for Climate Change. And a third is an amazing Learning by Leading program that's a model for student experiential leadership around environmental issues. Her talk will be on the UCD Arboretum and Public Garden as interdisciplinary learning laboratory connecting the campus and community through experiential teaching, learning research on and in the environment. I'm also delighted that we have once again lured Bethany Wiggin back to campus. Many of you will remember Bethany from her earlier visit under her German literature and history hat when she spoke at the Germans in the Midwest conference and at the Archives conference that Obermann hosted. Like many scholars in the environmental humanities, Bethany wandered from her home department at the University of Pennsylvania when she became the founding director of the University of Pennsylvania program in environmental humanities. In that role, she has led a host of local and national projects to draw attention to the effects of climate change. Her collaborations include research across the arts and sciences and public engagement in the environmental humanities, including projects like Timescales and an Ecotopian Toolkit. After the 2016 election, Bethany played a pivotal role in launching the Data Refuge Project to address concerns about federal climate and environmental data that was being removed from the U.S. government website. With Johns Hopkins engineering professor Peter DiCarlo, she researches and teaches summer research seminars to educate the public about pollution on the Schuylkill River, and she does so on boats. Her topic will be Humanists at Work in the World, Campus Community Partnerships for Environmental Justice. Let's give our guest a warm welcome.
Thank you, Teresa. It's just great to be here today. Can everyone hear me okay? Fantastic. Well, it's exciting to be in Iowa City. I've enjoyed that, and I just met a former Davis resident right here on the front row, and she can attest to the fact that Iowa City and Davis are very similar, right? So we're glad to have you here today. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about UC Davis, and I want to tell you that it was originally the farm school for UC Berkeley. And so it was on the edge of the Great Central Valley, and so it grew up really as an agricultural and environmental school. But over the years, it's become one of the 10 campuses, the Comprehensive University of the University of California. So it has, schools, colleges, and a strong environmental background. And Davis is a town gown community. And one thing that I found out when I was walking around here, you may never guess it. We have one thing really in common. We both border I-80, believe it or not. Now, can you imagine that? I never would have thought that. I was like, oh, there's I-80. And, so our university is right there, too. So what I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the history of the UC Davis Arboretum and Public Garden. It was founded by faculty in 1936, and they were rogue faculty members who went to the back of campus along the waterway and started planting plants. They happened to be really luminaries, and they became luminaries in botany and horticulture, so we have some really fabulous collections. And then we added in the student interest. When people started saying, we want jogging, we want to have a fun time at campus, the student fees paid for a complete remodel of the west end of the Arboretum with jogging paths and sailing. There's no more sailing today, but they invested quite a bit of money in that. And then in 1971, as happens with organizations, we were cut completely out of the budget. And so the volunteers came in, and so the community rose up, and we still have a huge community presence today. There are long memories of people remembering the days when the budget was cut. The volunteers actually went out and picked irises from the collection, took them downtown, sold them, bought hoses, and watered the plants until one person could be added through a grant. And so we have the first support group on campus and just so many volunteers and donors. And then UC Davis as a whole, I was lucky enough to go to UC Davis in 1998. That's a long time. It's 26 years ago. And when I went there, you can see the row of trees there, the dark trees there along the waterway, and then the entry to campus. When I went there, I think it was largely because I'd been at the Desert Botanical Garden as the director of education, and I had gotten a National Science Foundation grant to reimagine the collections as an interactive science museum. So UC Davis thought, well, we have 1,800 plant biologists. Let's find someone who can help us, reimagine the campus and the Arboretum. And so in 2011, after co-creating with so many people across campus, including the campus planner, who was very visionary, and Teresa has gotten to meet him, they decided that the whole campus should be a public garden and a living museum. So we've been working on that for a long time. So I'm going to just show some very quick slides just to hopefully spark some interest, and I'm happy to stay afterwards and talk with people in more depth. So the first thing I did when I got there is went into a leadership mode, and I thought, it's really confusing. We're right there in the middle of campus. Are we serving the community? Are we serving the faculty, the students? So we found this process developed by Peter Drucker. And Peter Drucker is considered the father of modern management, and he was very interested in social sector organizations. So it involved a year's worth of interviews, surveys, one-on-one conversations with people, and we put all the information together. We even had permission to email every single student at the university. And 50% of our responses were from students. And I had no idea it would take me months to read all the comments people were writing me. And they were telling me how much the Arboretum meant to them. So we got a really good feel for what a shared vision would be. And one thing that was interesting is we did an overall gap analysis. We said, what's most important to you and how are we doing? And so the most important thing was being a wild, beautiful, natural environment where they could study and relax or go run. Someone in the National Academy of Sciences wrote me a letter and said he couldn't do his work if he didn't run in the Arboretum. But we were already doing really well with that. So we focused on the things that we had a lot of room for growth. And the two things that stand out is people told me, you have to be more connected to the university. It's great that your volunteers love it and that they grow plants and sell them to them, but you've got to be, central to the university or you will never thrive over the years. And then someone had this idea, and then it kind of caught on. Why don't you tell the story of UC Davis? You saw how it ran along the whole front of campus, and we had the music department, the animal science, we had horses, and we would always say, don't look at the horses, you're supposed to look at the plants, and we had all these things there. And so we finally just said, well, maybe we should explore that. Maybe we should be the group that's sharing that. So the university is a land-grant university, so a 3-part mission: teaching, research, public service, or learning, discovery, engagement. So we thought, well, we can support teaching, we can support research, but maybe our starring role is bringing all that together as a major engagement arm, because it's free, open to the public, it's there for everyone. So we looked at the Kellogg Commission on the Future of State and Land-Grant Universities. That was written in 1999. Our chancellor was very involved in it. It still holds up today. It was really talking about how we could do so much better in serving our public and connecting them with our work. And so from the original report we thought, okay, we should be the ones to start sharing the expertise of UC Davis with the public and to connect the student learning and public engagement. So we started looking at it as a botanical garden or public garden. We already do environmental stewardship engagement, and we have a strong community engagement and fundraising program. But what if we add the academic part in? And we started studying that, experimenting, trying different programs, and lo and behold, this became our magic success spot. So whenever we do one program that's just environmental, we say, well, how can we add in the community engagement and fundraising? How can we add in some of our academic component? And when we hit all three and we get wins in all of them is when things really take off. So I'm going to talk about very quickly just a few examples from 3 programs that we've created over the years. And I know the teams here are working on special projects, and so these are fully formed because we've been working on them for so long, but they're still evolving. And they all started with sparks of ideas and, somebody thinking of something and someone else sharing just what you're doing now. And then you start to notice the patterns, you see what connects with people, and you build them into something. So I don't want to be overwhelming like these are done. And we thought they would, when we thought of them, we thought, oh, we'll just do these instantly. In fact, the first project, the Gateways project, the chancellor said you could raise $100 million for that project. But that's not what happened. We just did one project at a time, one pilot, one experiment. So I just want to encourage you to think like that, because it can be a little overwhelming. So the first one is our Gateways project, which stands for Gardens, Arts, and the Environment. It's really opening up the campus as a gateway to share the excellence of UC Davis and to engage people with the learning and the research that happens there. And this is kind of wild. This kind of grew over time. We do lots of pictures and things, but basically, we co-created with academic partners to share the expertise of UC Davis with the public. And by co-creating, it's just what you all are doing. You're really talking to people. You don't know how it's going to turn out. You know you have this shared vision. So I first went to the School of Education. We had an inaugural School of Education, and I went to the first faculty chair, and he was very interested in this, so he helped me think of, like maybe the gardens and landscapes could share the story, because people can't go in the buildings. In fact, the buildings don't usually even have names on them, and you don't feel like you're welcome. So what if the people could see the landscapes and feel connected? So we started this idea of gateway gardens. And then what about the music building? You can hear the trumpets playing behind the trees, but what if they just came out and performed or had experiences? Or what if the artists who are sketching came out into the Arboretum? So we started working on that. And over the years, they were just hand-drawn. But people said, people kept saying, I want one of these. I want a gateway garden. And so what you're going to hear are all the people who came to me after this shared vision and started proposing ideas. And so the first one was the California Rock Garden. That one was interesting because the Dean of Physical Sciences and Mathematics was excited about the Gateways project. And he kept coming up to me at meetings like, we need a garden, Kathleen, and it's going to be low maintenance. And he really meant that. He wanted the rocks for the geology department. And so in this particular case, they were building a new building, and he said, I'll give you the funds to build the landscape if you co-create with us. And so we co-created with faculty, and it was interesting. Eldridge Morse, who's up in the right-hand corner, was a retired professor, is really considered the father of plate tectonic theory. He was so excited. He loves teaching. Like, are we going to teach the public about my rocks? This is fantastic. And so we did sign mock-ups. We tested them, and we made a lot of progress there. But there was one problem. We were still thinking landscape. So we had a big idea of this whole wall that would tell the history of rocks, a visual wall like a museum. And but I kept hearing people say, I went on another field trip. We got some more rocks. And it turns out the faculty were going all over Northern California collecting the specimens, because when they said a low-maintenance rock garden, that's what they had in mind, even though we thought something else. So long story short, I kept telling the campus planner, I think they need rocks in the garden. He's like, no, we don't have rocks in the garden. We already have the plan. And I said, now I heard that they got alumni from Granite Construction to go pick up all the rocks in giant trucks, and they're staging them in West Sacramento. So I said, we've got to do the rocks. So anyway, what they had in mind were more wins. They wanted the students to learn from the rocks and from the specimens and learn how to do their measuring and learn how to do, the classification of the rocks. So that was a lesson for us. I'm not going to tell that much of a story on all of these, but every single one of them surprised us because we stayed open and we listened and we kept looking for wins. So this is a very popular place on campus, and it's fun when they take their tests out there. They cover this. We have boulder labels. They cover the signs and they do their tests there. This was another one where the landscape architecture department was really upset because their courtyard looks so messy and it didn't reflect their ecological approach to landscaping. And so they said, what if we start doing design build classes? And every time we have a construction class, they'll do another piece of this. And at first they were just doing special projects and displaying them like museum exhibits. And then they said, well, students actually need to really learn how to conceive of a whole plan and execute it and maintain it. And one of I've read the articles that have been written about this, and one of them is about the landscape as a laboratory. And the students have transformational experiences because they say, wow, they never really understood what it took to maintain something, and it's going to change completely how they design it. And it's also going to give them so much more respect for the people who are taking care of the landscape. So this was an example of something that has been very successful, and now it's a hangout place. One of the professors says, several of them have their meetings out there. They have their faculty meetings out there. And during COVID, it was an amazing place. And then another thing that happened is there was a new vet school dean hired, and the chancellor told him he would get an office. And so the campus planner came to me, we're going to build a new office for this dean out by the vet school. What if we put a gateway garden there? And we had no idea what it would be. So we invited the faculty together, and we had several meetings, and we brainstormed, and they listed ideas. And then we got a full proposal from Lisa Tell, who's up there in the picture. she's in charge of the Hummingbird Genomics Center, and she's studying the hummingbirds as harbingers of climate change. And she said, boy, it would be amazing if we could have a hummingbird garden here. And then we would have the population of hummingbirds. And she's actually showing that donor, because donors got involved, and they got to actually help band the hummingbirds and learn about that. And so she said it would be wonderful if students had a place right here. And she had noticed that in our teaching nursery, they were really excited about all the hummingbirds. So now so much has been done here. This is just a rendering, but it's all there in real life. I just don't have an overhead picture of it all. And we moved a restaurant there. So now it has Scrubs, which is the restaurant. So all the vet school students are there and the public can go there. And we have the beautiful gardens, and we all helped. And one last one, this came from a totally different motivation. The Native American Honoring Committee was formed when there was a tragic incident with the construction of the Mondavi Center for the Performing Arts, and it turned out it was a village site for the Patwin who lived there, and there were 6 bodies found there, and so everything stopped. There was a lot of anger. I mean, I have learned so much about what a hard time that was, but our chancellor was really amazing, and he pulled a committee together to really start the healing process. And so this committee wanted to do a garden as part of an honoring project. So they came and they asked us about that. And so this one was co-creative in the sense that we thought it was going to be with the Native American Studies faculty, like all the other projects. But they had such deep understanding. They said, no, we need to go talk to the tribal elder of the Patwin. And so Bill Wright, throughout, he was very nice about it because, no, these signs won't work. This is not what we want. So we have these concepts of these monuments, and the Patwin language is on there. And he told this story. You walk through the garden, you hear the story of the people living there. And the oak across the way would have been there when the Patwin lived there, because that's the age. So it was a beautiful story, but he really wanted people to understand that the Patwin were taken off the land and put in Indian schools, and they lost their culture. So we worked with an anthropology firm, too, to look up all the names. So all the names of the people who were taken off this land are on that column. And so that is the contemplative garden, and there are a number of projects in this. The students, the Native American students, just adopted this garden, and it's very important to them. They help plant. And now we're going to be doing the rest of the monuments on campus. So you see how each one just kind of comes out totally different if you do what you all are doing, which is share and think of creative ideas. And this is just another one. The provost was very excited about the Gateways project, and we didn't raise $100 million, but she gave us an investment of $500,000 to start some projects because she was so excited about it. And one of them was, she said, I want you to work with this entomology professor, Diane, to the right there, because she's doing this amazing art-science fusion program. She's teaching entomology classes with an artist, and they're doing tile mosaics. And so throughout the years, we've done so many of these. This is called Nature's Gallery. The students all went out into our garden, adopted a plant, just worshiped that plant, spent a lot of time with the plant and all the insect life, and then they went into what was once a lab that became a studio. It's up there, you see the students. It's called the Labudio, and we still have the Labudio. And even community members can come and help. So this Nature's Gallery Court has been very popular. It's now the premier site for prom. Everybody goes out there for high school prom because whatever color you have, you're wearing, it looks really great. But it also went to the U.S. Botanic Garden in D.C. and was on the First Lady's wall. You see the student in the corner there. He's actually in the oak grove. And I was talking to Andy about that's our most valuable scientific collection, our oaks. And they each adopted an oak and got to know it, and each did a plaque. And so the funny thing about that was we also did a big mosaic called the Oak Family Tree, which was the phylogenetic connections. And a student was doing graduate research in the oak grove about insect and plant biodiversity. He got accepted to be in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and he sent the picture of the mosaic that the students had done, and they accepted it for the cover. So that's our highest claim to fame in terms of research. I don't know if it counts, but. And then just quickly, the Dean of the Humanities, Arts, and Cultural Studies, you start to get a theme here that people take their time figuring out their visions, just like you're doing. I want to encourage you to keep doing that. So she said, let's have meetings for a whole year with all the chairs of art, dance, music, you name it. And so we met every month for a year and came up with all these different ideas of how to connect arts and the environment. One of the things they say, can you see Romeo hanging down there? They told us, don't create us formal places. We want to use the places you have here. So they kept saying that. So that was a gazebo in the Arboretum. And unbeknownst to me, I went to the performance and they had a special lawn chair for me. The students did this. And he's climbing up on the roof and she's like, don't worry, he's a climber. So anyway, and this Ripple Effect is a sculpture class done by Robin Hill. And her students do a class called Where Here Is, and they go out through the Arboretum and campus and discover things they want to share. This class wanted to do ripples in the water, but we wouldn't let them go in the water. So they said they'll do mulch ripples. But then the ginkgo tree lost its leaves, so every day they went out and moved the ginkgo leaves into the ripple, and this became quite a spectacle. You can see other projects. There was a visiting artist that had the horticulture team collect all the, leftover cuttings and make a quilt. We started to put these together with festivals, and then Margaret up in the corner, this is an interesting story, it just kind of shows how these things build on each other over time. She was a visiting dance professor that did her whole dance performance in the Arboretum, and then now she's on the faculty of dance at UC Davis, and she's leading a whole effort with the Art Museum for Elevate the Arts. And she said, and I was at a meeting recently and I said something, she goes, well, remember I did that dance. Like I forgot to mention that she did that. So also we have the Learning by Leading program, and I'm going to do this quickly. We have a leadership ladder, and students are empowered to move up into the leadership levels. This is Ellen Sanders, and she came to us because she was working with her tribe and as a student, and she wanted to restore her native lands. And she thought, I need to be a nursery student. So she's learned how to do that, and now the Intertribal Agriculture Council is coming and for training at the nursery. It is a model where there's always a staff mentor. The students call themselves COCOs for co-coordinators, and there's a student intern team. And this is our waterway stewardship team, and they do a lot of research out in the Arboretum. This is Kendall, who is the COCO, and she's talking about their floating island project, which was a research project for cleaning the water, and they were very, very proud of that. They designed it themselves. Also, this is Ryan, and Ryan hated school. He just was almost flunking out, and until he got in this program, he started working with the education team. He ended up being so successful that he went to the Smithsonian Gardens to teach them how to do the Learning by Leading program, and now has his master's in environmental education. So we also have a community of practice from universities across the country, and if you're interested, we mostly have people from public gardens, but the model we're starting to spread to others, and so just let me know. Then we have, finally, our Living Landscape Adaptation Plan. It's a 70-year plan for climate change. And the campus planner said he would not even have considered doing this if we hadn't had the student program, because he couldn't, it's enough to take care of campus unless you have extra help. So the students work in 3 main areas. They help, and they co-create with us. They talk about co-creating. They really do feel like they are empowered as leaders. And they work on these, the climate-ready landscapes, trees, and health and well-being. And so across campus, we have a number of conversion projects that we've done where students have designed and worked with our campus. This is tricky. It's higher level leadership, interacting with different people from different the grounds team is in the union, and so like how do we work together and beautify the campus and make it more ready for climate change. One of the successes is they're taking areas that just are sort of neglected and working on those. Also, the Urban Tree Stewardship Program, one of the things we discovered is that we don't often plant new trees on campus because they take so much work to care for them. And then if you don't do it correctly and they're not cared for in the beginning years, they won't survive. So they haven't been involved in caring and stewarding the young trees. And they also are involved in our Texas Tree Trials program because our climate is slated to be in 70 years like Barstow. You might think about moving back, I don't know. She said she might move back, but that's a desert climate. It's going to be a shock. I don't mean to make light of it at all. So they're looking at trees from Texas, and they've even gone on research trips with us, helping with that. And the final thing is the health and well-being, and we've been working with a Nature RX program across the country, and we finally just have these prescriptions that our health and wellness centers are going to be given for going out in nature for your own health. We also have a sheep mowers program done by the Landscape Architecture Department, and the sheep move across campus. And it become, last week they were out there with 400 students from landscape architecture across the United States, and the head of the conference has dressed up like Little Bo Peep. But they do a chair share program, they move chairs around, we're building nature nooks across campus, all to, help mitigate climate change and the stresses on that. So, and the final thing, this just happened last week, that we started our waterway project. So this is just a reminder that the students are working on the waterway, and we have fundraising and donors help, and everybody's involved, and we're going to be doing a major transformation of the waterway into a restored habitat for wildlife, and we're very excited about that. But that's just a reminder, everything comes with the fundraising part too. So, and this is our purpose statement that drives us, inspiring human potential to help people and environments thrive. So that's what keeps us going. I think I took a little longer than I was supposed to.
Wow, don't you want to go to Davis? Kathleen, that was so inspiring. Really a treat to listen to. I didn't need to be lured back to Iowa City. I'm very happy to be here, not least because it's a site of incredible literary production, but also because of Teresa. And I just want to say thank you. Teresa told me, she called me and she said, do you think you could come back? And I was like, well, I don't know, because I had a lot of stuff on. And then she said, well, I'm retiring. And I was like, what? I'm coming. So thank you, Teresa, for that. It's just a pleasure to be here. I might need just a little bit of help to exit out of here. As a literary person, I am a little more of a reader than Kathleen, so I'm going to go back and forth between my slides and a script that I actually wrote. I changed my title just a little bit, as you can see, partially because I really got thinking about the prompt that Teresa gave us, this making spaces. And so I structured the talk around 4 spaces where I have, with many others, made some projects. And so the talk is going to move sort of in 4 parts through these 4 spaces: archive, river, museum, and street. And you'll see that they aren't hermetically sealed from one another, but in fact bleed into each other, or maybe I should say seep, because a lot of these projects and a lot of the work that we do in Philadelphia is around rivers and water, as you will soon see. So I wanted to say also at the outset that Teresa asked me to be really pragmatic And so this talk is going to be like really nuts and bolts. How do we make these things? How do these projects also engage students? How do I work them into syllabuses? So you're going to see some syllabuses on the screen. All of these materials that I'll show you are also available in the public domain, and please take them and use them in any ways that might be of help to you. So let me just get myself sorted here. In the background of the pragmatic remarks are some broader kind of questions, and I'm just going to pose them for you and sort of leave them. And maybe we can come back to talk about them in the Q&A, but I really began this work because I was thinking about what would it mean to reimagine a university that was rooted in and responsive to local community needs. The university where I teach is not a public university. The University of Pennsylvania is a private university. It's a Ivy League university, and it's really very private and doesn't particularly care about the surrounding places. So I wanted to ask, what would it be like in this place to think about how universities might cultivate place attachment, and sort of in dialogue with some of my doubters, I wanted to really challenge myself in making these projects to think about if a university that was responsible to local communities somehow become provincial, right? I think we all kind of wonder about that. I also have been thinking a lot, and I bet you are too, about how this kind of responsible work can be evaluated. Is it research? Is it service? Like, what is it? And why do we make it? Who's it for? And along those same lines, what are the ethical considerations for those of us like myself, like some of you, who work inside the academy, making work that impacts people outside the academy? Do we need to go to, for example, the IRB? What are the ethical dimensions? How much can we commit to? What do we need to take into account in making this work? So by training, I am actually a cultural historian. I've come to environmental history in the last 10 years, but my training was in the cultural history of early modern Europe and North America. And here you see a 1755 map of, as imagined, the coast, the Delaware River, and the borderline between what was then called West Jersey and East Jersey, today Penns Woods or Pennsylvania. The Schuylkill River, which you see, let me see here, at the bottom of this map, the Schuylkill River is today, of course, one of Philadelphia's two rivers, and it was named actually the Hidden River in Dutch, like Schu is hidden and Kill is river, by these Dutch explorers who knew that it was a very important river from native informants, but they actually couldn't find it because the dense marshlands really obscured where the mouth of this river was. And this space plays a really important role in a book that I'm writing now, which is called Utopia Found and Lost in Penns Woods. And it really is very much also about the transformation of this waterway. Now, I, of course, also work really close to here. And I think it's really fair to say that this river has seeped into my work. I like to think of it as it's kind of called me to account. And it's asked me to reconsider how such a beautiful place could become so undone. And I've chosen to embrace this accountability to this river and its multi-species communities. And so now, alongside the conventional, more scholarly work that I make, and I mean by that articles and monographs published by academic presses or in journals, I also try to make work that's accountable and responsible to worlds beyond the academic. And that's what I'm going to talk with you about today. So 10 years ago, I really began responding to the river by reaching out to others in Philadelphia and in the region who knew this river in a variety of ways. So hydrologists, kayakers, art historians, historians of science, engineers, wildlife, refuge managers, park managers, chemists, experiential educators. And I figured, well, these people could help me understand how this river became so transformed. And after about a year of informal meetings, we got together more formally at Bartram's Garden, which is a public garden along the banks of the Schuylkill River, to form what we called the Schuylkill River Research Corps. And it was about 60 people from all varieties of academic and nonprofits whose work touched the river in some way. And our mission was, the invitation that we sent out said, please come to consider how collaborations with other River Corps members might augment what you're already doing. And we said, we want to see how we can together hold up and support existing initiatives and find synergies for new ones. So following the first meeting, 7 working groups then came out of that, and they worked collaboratively to generate proposals for what they wanted to do. And really, across these 7 working groups, it was very clear people wanted to offer tours, including these river tours that you see here, and they also really wanted us to build an open repository, a kind of living archive of and for the river. So that's what we did. And when I say we, there were 3 of us who were really working on this project at that time. Teresa, in her introduction, mentioned my long-term collaborator, Peter DiCarlo, an environmental engineer, now at Johns Hopkins. And we worked together also with Danielle Redden, who was the public manager of Bartram's Garden. So we hosted what we called the River Research Corps Seminar. It was a very sort of traditional seminar. We met on campus, sometimes off campus, once every 2 weeks, and we invited just everyone we could think of whose work would illuminate different facets of the river. And all of these presentations and their research were put into this living archive. I just wanted to show you, like, some of the images that our art historians found. These are all the same places that you're looking at, literally. The transformation is quite startling, and it really picks up speed when a refinery in 1860 is sited there. And I'll just leave you with that 1975 fire. So we all found making this work actually to be really fun. And I think it's important to kind of mark that there was a real energy of working together. We liked each other. It felt good. It was fun to be out on the river. It wasn't as fun to be chased by refinery security personnel who were constantly somehow suspicious that we were possibly terrorists. It was a national security installation, as these sites are, and so we learned to be careful. They confiscated a lot of our equipment, actually. We got a meaningful break. In 2016, we got a grant from the Whiting Foundation, and it allowed me to take a semester away from my normal teaching obligations, and it provided a really modest grant. It was $10,000, which we promptly re-granted and said, hey, we'll have a competition. We called it the Ecotopian Toolmaking Project, and I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. So I wanted to say that another thing that we did, and now we're really getting into nitty-gritty nuts and bolts, how do we build this? Each one of the River Seminar's co-conveners, we played up cross-institutional and cross-sector collaboration, but also rivalries to raise more money. We would say, well, that university gave us $4,000, so don't you think you should? And then Penn would be like kind of jealous, and they would give money, and then we kept doing that. So we cobbled together a little bit of money. Pete was able to get an award from Drexel to take real-time air quality measurements adjacent to the refinery. Those were the sensors that were then confiscated by the refinery, we think. And I was able to parlay that into still more funds from Penn. Danielle and their colleagues at Bartram's were able to parlay our collaboration into a pretty meaningful grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to really build out their STEAM program. They had a good STEM program, but they wanted to make it inclusive of arts. And then since then, we've received much more substantial grants to support this regionally collaborative work. So Pete and I, we also started a summer field school, which Teresa also mentioned, and we grew increasingly attuned to the need to make sure that archival materials didn't just somehow live online and we think that was public, but we wanted to take all the materials we were collecting and make sure they were circulating back in and with the communities who had made them in some cases or who contributed them. Here you see students from a class of mine doing a site visit. This is along the banks of the river at Bartram's Garden. If you look in the distance, you can see some of the crackers of the refinery just across the river. This is student Anna Alonso, who was a member in that field school that I mentioned that we talked, that Pete and I taught together. It was a field school that we were very proud of because it was the first time that it was any type of academic offering was co-taught at Penn and at Drexel at the same time. And we also were able to get money to support community fellows who also took the class. And they were staff members from Bartram's Garden, from John Hines National Wildlife Refuge, which is just sort of down the river and around the corner a little bit, and from the Independent Seaport Museum. And we had some artists. And with our grant money, we were able to pay them to be in the class and to design projects through that class that were helpful to the institutions that they work at. I'm going to play you a little clip of Anna talking about this class. I hope it's just going to play. Yeah. Okay.
I think a lot of the exercises that we did at the on-water intensive were really geared toward promoting this bidirectional flow between community members and research. So on the one hand, having community members use the research in various aspects of the Schuylkill River and their projects, whether that be creating educational materials or helping people understand their health as it relates to the river. And on the other hand, having community members become stakeholders in research on the Schuylkill River.
We really wanted to be on boats, in part because we wanted to be able to look at certain bioindicators in the water that we could only really measure from a boat. But there's something incredibly powerful about the boat as a metaphor. We're thinking about the kind of collaborative communities we need that will keep us afloat in a watery future. We're thinking about the ethics of collaboration, who floats in, who floats out. And so that's what we're really practicing. And we really believe that it's these collaborations that can lead to effective action on climate.
So this sounds like the end of my talk, but it's not. I just want to warn you. I mentioned that we really wanted to make sure that we weren't just making work for academic communities, but that we were making work that circulated in and with communities. So one thing that we did is that we talked with, in this case, a group called the Eastwick Friends and Neighbors Coalition, and we said, like, well, what would be useful to you? Like, what could we make together? How can you help us also understand your life with the river? And they said, well, an oral history project would be great. So, of course, we did an oral history project. We they live, in the online repository, but we also made a jukebox, and this jukebox is in Eastwick. And I'll just give you a sense. You can see the kind of early stages here, different oral histories, and you take a binder and you open it up, and you can see here, place a binder onto the surface, and the clips from the oral history will play for you, so you can kind of listen to it there. It was a really fun project to make. Neighbors loved it. Their feedback was, why did you only do clips? We want to hear the whole thing. I had to say, well, the whole thing is in the digital archive, so no worries, like you can go and listen to it, but they wanted it there, and so that was a really good thing to know. Noted. We also worked with artist groups, and I was talking with some wonderful people who are part of the projects you're developing here this morning about this. I wanted to think about, like, also how could I connect my students again to this more experimental stuff, and I realized, like, having mini artist residencies was probably the way to do that. So in conjunction with this class, Liquid History and Floating Archives, you can see one of the art projects we made there kind of floating up underneath a bridge. That was literally a floating archive, a screen that played images from the archive and was mounted between two kayaks. It was a crazy, crazy installation, actually. People could see it as they were driving by on the freeway and stopped and would, like, yell down from the bridge, like, what are you doing? What is that? It was really very, very fun and cool. We had this group, the Environmental Performance Agency, the EPA, come and do a mini residency. They came to that class I was just talking about, and we loved their work so much that we invited them to develop a series of exercises or scores that moved along the Schuylkill River in 13 stages. Here you see one Station 3, climbing out of sea level rise. And these dancers, artists, and plant botanists led us through these exercises as ways to discover the river and experience the river in a very different way. Okay, so that they were a part of this ongoing ecotopian tool-making initiative, and I just wanted to show you, partially just simply because I'm proud of this, that we had a first ever museum exhibit, which was this past year. This was in partnership with the Independent Seaport Museum, and you can see some stages of the exhibit there. The tool makers were challenged to do public workshops with whoever came into the museum on those various days. And the workshops were then also documented and became part of the exhibit itself. This is a student of mine looking at artist Nancy Agate's rain gardens. She made sort of a mini version for the museum exhibit. I want you to think back to the refinery, and I'm coming to the end of my talk, actually. You saw a 1975 explosion, but there was a 2019 explosion, and that's what you see here, and truly it was really terrifying. This refinery really had dominated the entire river since the Civil War. Some 1 million people by 2019 lived in the blast zone, and it was really only the heroic actions of a woman working in the alkalytic unit that night, Unit 423, that avoided a really catastrophic death situation. It was a refinery that used hydrogen fluoride, which is extremely dangerous. And she shut it down within seconds, and it was a good thing she did. The explosion at the refinery created a sudden and actually very unexpected opening for what we started to call futures beyond refining along the river. And I knew in June, I knew I was going to teach a graduate seminar in the fall, and I thought I have to reshape to take account for and respond to this explosion. I had been working, because of the Schuylkill River Research Corps, with a variety of advocacy and activist groups along the river, and we partnered, I partnered our class, a small group of 8 graduate students, together with 8 neighbors who are all members of Resident Action Committee 2, which is now a community certified neighborhood organization, and the students and the neighbors together ideated together what they each wanted to make. So we came up with this collaborative Futures Beyond Refining project. Here you see some of the students and some of the neighbors. The neighbors said, well, what thing we really want is for people to understand what it's been like to live with this refinery over generations. You all think this was the only explosion, but actually there's been ongoing accidents and very like toxic air events happening for their whole lives. They said cancer rates are elevated in this neighborhood. Nobody's paying attention to us. What is happening? Because of the networks that we had created, we were able to do this when this explosion happened. I think that's for me, it's been a really important lesson. That in making community engaged work, what seems important to me is to have relationships in place so that when an emergency happens, you can help, you can respond. So how did we respond? Partially by developing this course, but we really thought together about what it was that we wanted to do. And one was a public visioning process about what would a future beyond refining in this area look like. But also a documentation process of what it's been like to live in the shadow of what was the East Coast's largest refinery. We made memory maps. That was the beginning of our project. Neighbors led students through like what certain areas smelled like, or what it was like to sleep as a kid looking out onto this refinery from your bedroom window. These memory maps then fed another modest oral history project. Students also worked with the neighbors to develop a driving tour. You see just a still from that, and I'm going to show you a short clip from a documentary that we made from a walking tour. The neighbors were really clear that they wanted not only university students to hear their stories, but more than anything, they wanted school-age middle schoolers to know what it was like, so that in their mind that would never happen again. So we developed workshops that were in middle schools in 4 different science classrooms, and those children were then brought to take a tour that was led by the neighbors that the students helped curate based on the oral history project. So hopefully this is going to play a clip of one of the neighborhood tour guides, community expert Mrs. Tammy Reeves, talking to these school children who you will see.
It's really scary to know that whatever was in that plant is killing you. And they lied to us. And if you ask them today, they'll continue to lie and say it's not harmful. Well, it is harmful, very harmful. If they're closed down, why are there still fumes coming out of, so what they said was, oh, they're cleaning the pipes over there. It's not hazardous. They told us it wasn't hazardous. If it's not hazardous, why do you need to put on hazmat to go in and clean up?
Another thing that was really, and I really am coming to the end of my talk now, but I want to say that much like we saw with Kathleen, commemoration and memorial practices were also a really important part of this. Neighbors really wanted a memorial to lives lost to refining. So together with Amy Balkan and a lot of neighbors and a lot of students, we ended up making this billboard, which was posted alongside Philadelphia's busiest street. This is along Schuylkill Expressway, right along the river. And you see here featured in it, from reading from left to right, a map, a remediation map of the refinery lands, and then a quote that I'll read in conclusion. You see a picture of phytoremediating pleaves. I believe that's a Bartram's, I forgot the plant, I'm embarrassed to say, and then a still that I took of the refinery from a bridge. And the artist was really inspired by this oral history that Mr. Charles Reeves had contributed, in which he said, I want it to be a cemetery. That thing should be a cemetery for everybody who can't afford to bury their family. That's the truth in my heart. Put some flowers around there, some trees and blank, but bury people right there because it already killed people. So I'll leave it with that.
So we've still got some time for half an hour for conversation, and I know that you all welcome any questions.
Yeah, we're covered.
So I guess I can just give us one question to get going. As both of you emphasized, you have to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we already have some wonderful projects on campus. We have our wonderful campus arborist here. We have this pattern of pocket gardens. We have Stratus here from the Center for Sustainability. And we've been talking about, with the projects, the groups that are going to meet next Friday and take their ideas through a design workshop, where they can start. So I wonder, what you all presented us with is so extraordinary. Where did you start?
You want to go first?
Yeah, no, I mean, I really did start the way that I talked about, right? That I one day, was really tired of being in the library working on, this sort of historic descriptions of this rich lush river. Like European colonists couldn't believe, they literally said like birds are falling from the sky and fish are jumping into our boats, right? And these kind of like incredible descriptions of this kind of bountiful landscape. And then walking down there the next, like an hour later, I was like, how did this happen? Like, I mean, on some levels, it's a very naive question, right? But I wanted to take it really seriously, and that's kind of where things started. I also think that maybe I was a little tired of sitting all by myself in the library, and I wanted to talk to other people. I think that was part of it. That's it.
Well, one thing that comes to mind is my favorite quote, and it's been attributed to different people. In the Drucker process, they attributed it to Einstein, and it says, to achieve greatness, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. So I think the first thing I always do is to try to figure out where I am, start where you are, because I see a lot of aspirational plans that aren't taking into account reality. Mm-hmm. So I like the notion that you're trying to achieve greatness, but you're starting where you are and using, surveying what you have and see what you can do with it. And it's just that continual, if you keep doing that, it adds up. So when I went to Davis, it was starting with that process to try to get to know where I was and who the people were and what they wanted. So,
thank you.
Yes.
And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself so we can start building community here too.
Hi, I'm Mandy Duffy. I'm with Science Education, the Geology Department. Bethany, I had a quick question for you. I really appreciated the whole community-based aspect of your project and how you had the local community really involved. And I was just wondering, could you expand more on how you were able to develop those relationships and build that connection?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Part of it, I think, and maybe this is transferable to here in Iowa City, part of it is that my university is a big presence. And so when the University of Pennsylvania says, we're holding a meeting and we would really like you to come, actually people tend to come. And we try to also be super welcoming and generous, and like I beat people's doors down, like please come. Like we really want to, think we want to have this collaborative research group around this space. And I think that it also, maybe because it seemed so absurd in a way, like I was asking people to think about a really degraded place and think about what it would mean to actually care for it. Like what would that look like? And I think there was something in that cognitive friction that people were like, oh, this is kind of interesting.
Hi, Eric Goodall from the English department. This is picking up on, Bethany, one of the things you said underlined your presentation, but it's really addressed to both of you, which has to do, I guess, with the question of ethics in terms of community engagement. But I've been thinking a lot about place, because it seems when we're talking about an arboretum or different campus sites, as many of us are thinking about here, we're thinking about the idea of the university campus as a kind of place apart, or a third space, as we were talking. There seem to be different kind of spatial components to the different projects that the two of you are describing. So I guess I'm trying to feel my way towards a question that's about the ethics of that, and not to doubt the ethics, but to kind of best practices, and thinking about not only the ethics of dealing with community, but also the ethics of situating these kinds of projects and thinking about the kind of spaces, whether it be an arboretum and a garden on a campus in California or along an industrialized river space in Philadelphia. Hope that question makes sense.
I'm not quite ready to answer that. I'm not quite sure.
Maybe I can, go ahead.
Why don't you start, because I'm trying to still understand the question clearly.
Well, one of the things that maybe I could answer it is, it's going to be strange to answer a question about space and place in terms of time and temporality, but I'm going to, which is that unlike the 70-year plan and unlike the campus that is there, the projects that I've made have actually, or have helped make, have been temporary, like all of them, actually. And a lot of that has to do with being very mindful of these are not places that are mine. And I didn't feel that we had the resources to make a project that would live in a place that I couldn't care for it for a long time, if that makes sense. We did a project as the first, I told you guys this story at lunch, so forgive me, but I partnered with an artist, Mary Mattingly, to have a floating lab in the river, and we ran that lab for a year and a half. And it was built on an old houseboat, basically, that we stripped and converted, and Mary did most of that. And then we did some programming around it and built floats and things. And then the collaboration came to an end in like June, and Mary was waiting the boat was supposed to be moved to a museum in Long Island, the Seaport Museum, and there was a terrible storm where an incredible amount of rain, a climate event, like happened in Philadelphia, where a very lot of rain came in a very short amount of time. There was a lot of debris in the river, and we think that a tree or some other sharp object that came down in the river punctured the hull, and the boat sank in about 45 seconds. It just went underwater. And that, so the headline was Climate Change Sinks a Boat, about an art project about climate. So it wasn't really funny, but it was traumatic, honestly, because here I was, like, I wasn't officially part of the project anymore, but of course I still felt responsible. And we had to hire divers to come and put, inflatables in and pull it up, and then we had to get it over to the scrapyard. And I just was like, I don't want to make anything that I can't really tend. And even though that hadn't happened on my watch, like, I felt like I looked bad. So for me, it was really, I should have been maybe more forceful or firm with the artist that she needed to move it, but she didn't have it, like it was like a tricky situation. So now I have very clear, like, this project ends and it's done, right? So that billboard came down. Like, we paid for the rent for, I think it was 6 weeks, and then it was done. So I don't have the resources at this stage to make more permanent things.
This may not be answering it directly, but it just came to mind. We're doing a lot of work with the Native American tribes in our area, and a lot of work beyond just that honoring project. We have a whole grand challenge at the university that's called Reimagining the Land Grant University, that's grappling with the land grab, basically, and what that means. And repeatedly, our team is, connecting with the Native American tribes, because we're actually the stewards of the Putland land, and we're inviting them in to share in that stewardship. And that seems to be really a powerful role that the Arboretum and Public Garden is playing, because I went to a retirement ceremony for one of the Native American Studies faculty member who's been so inspirational to the students, and one of the young women just said, she taught us this place wasn't built for us, but she taught us how to navigate it and this and that. So it's been really it's been just in our minds, what can we do as the stewards of this land that really isn't our land, and how can we help? So I don't know, that's just a thought that came to mind.
Hi, I want to thank you both. This has been incredible to listen to, and I've seen some of my colleagues here leaning in, so that's a really good sign. My name is Carolina Kaufman. I'm the Director of Education at the Pentecrest Museums here, which is the Museum of Natural History and the Old Capitol Museum, and it's been so inspirational to hear about this collaboration that's lasted for so long, and I feel like this is starting to happen in one very beautiful ways amongst many colleagues here, between OSE, did I say that right? Yes, and facilities management with the tree tours, in particular the tree tour programs that we've been doing. And one of the things that I've discovered in the time that I've been working with Andy on these tours is this idea of like meeting the challenges when we have to sort of reimagine or rethink how we want to engage the public. And then, like you said, these relationships takes time. I'm on the Native American Council, and I support their efforts and advocacy for the voices to be heard, both for those communities, but also in the programs that I do, and I'm very intentional about including that. But I also recognize the challenges that come with that. To make that, again, a goal that the University of Iowa shares is we try to aim for a transformational societal change. So thinking about transformational societal change, what kind of challenges did you feel you were up against as you developed your projects and worked on great collaboration? Because it's clear by your outcomes that it's been worthwhile every step of the way. Share some of those challenges with us and how you push through them, and anything that you might advise as we work in our university to really think about collaboration in very enriching, engaging ways and inclusive ways. Thank you.
So the Native American focus of our university is very strong right now. And it is in the UC system too. They just committed to any federally recognized Native American student can have free tuition to the University of California. And that's a little bit of an issue because not everyone's federally recognized, but it still is a start. And there's, like I said, this grand challenge. So I'm not really involved at the highest level in terms of the bigger issues. I think I've been fortunate in that everybody kind of can come around the plants and the honoring, and it's just a very good place to be. It's not as challenging, but I'm very, very respectful of the committee, and they have made it clear that we need to follow the consensus model for all the meetings, and that's how the PUT one did it. And so the one thing we've noticed, it's very slow, and and just I'm a co-creative person, but it's taxed me almost, But I've learned a lot from that, and so I think our university has some issues. We have a lot of burial sites on campus, and so we have. There's a new project going on. I'm not privy to all the things going on, but it's very controversial because a student housing area is being taken down, and it's on top of a lot of remains, and so the question of what to do. So people are grappling with some big issues, and some people are saying, do we give it back? Do we? And now they're thinking that maybe they'll do kind of gardens that who knows, but. Not exactly answer your question, but it's. I will say this: our provost told me that it's the thing that keeps most, university presidents awake. But we have a really fabulous team, and that she really trusts. She said, so luckily I'm not as nervous about it, but it's tricky. But there is a big commitment from UC, so. We also have success centers. Do you have student success centers?
I believe yes. We have student success centers.
We have one for the Native American community, and they have what they call the Native Nest, and it's a very warm house feeling with all kinds of crafts, and you can just feel like you can be yourself there and relax. And it's interesting because what I notice is that there's a lot of tension between the Native American Studies faculty and actual tribal members and students. Just there's always the tribal politics on top of the university politics. And so one of the Native American Studies professors said, I don't know what they're doing in that Native Nest. They're supposed to be helping them with their student success, but they're having Waffle Wednesdays. But the students are very, very engaged, and now they want to do a garden there, a teaching garden with us. So anyway, those are just some random experiences that I've noticed.
Hi, I'm Jenna Soap Montgomery, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Iowa. And I just want to thank you both for coming and thank the Obermann Center for hosting this. It's amazing to be in a space like this where I see colleagues, but I also see like a local environmental educator and a family friend who's famous for cultivating baby oak trees. And so that's just really special. I haven't been in many spaces like this. One of the things that's very exciting to me, but also quite daunting, is how transformational this work is for the humanities in particular. And it's very exciting to see ways in which humanities research becomes expressed as public education or art installations or gardens. And I'm curious if part of that transformation is also offering some new value to what we might think of as more traditional humanities practice. So, Bethany, you described leaving the archive. Like, does the Dusty Archive still feature in some of this other work? And does this work, and I don't know if you have stories about this with maybe even the Gateway Gardens, but does this work ever come back and get expressed in like scholarly articles and things like that are not necessarily about process or pedagogy, but are also doing kind of research in the moment in these sites?
Do you want to go first? Yes to all of those things. I'll just answer anecdotally if that's okay. One project that I didn't talk about here, you heard I am a German professor, and you might wonder, like, why do you do all this American stuff? So the short answer is that in the 17th and 18th century, the population of what was becoming Pennsylvania was roughly 50 to 60% German speakers. So the archives in Pennsylvania to this day are filled with German language materials, and many place names are German, and et cetera. So in the anecdote that I'll share is that I also live in a neighborhood called Germantown, which is a neighborhood of Philadelphia. And I work a lot with Historic Germantown, which holds these archives. And today, Germantown is a very mixed, very vibrant neighborhood. It's roughly 65% African American and really doesn't have a lot of cultural continuity with the older historic materials. White flight from the 1930s really on really shifted the demographics in that neighborhood. So I've been working with Historic Germantown to find ways to actually activate those old archival materials for audiences who might not necessarily feel that they have a connection with them. So one of the things that we've been doing is talking about Germantown as a place where the oldest written anti-slavery statement was produced in 1688. And doing some interpretive work to say this is a neighborhood that really from its colonial beginnings has been fairly staunchly anti-slavery, and connecting that with people. I've heard neighbors then say, like, I didn't know that. And like, it's like I watch them get about 6 inches taller. And there's a real sense of like, wow, it's so special to be a part of this neighborhood. So that's an anecdotal answer to that. And I'll just say super briefly, yes, I do write about these, also some of these projects in scholarly ways. And in particular, the work that I've been doing on the river has been helping me to reimagine what was a narrow scholarly book that had to sort of end in the middle of the 18th century with the French and Indian War. And instead, I've really had to think about what would it mean formally in terms of a historian's practice to tell and narrate a history that is not just a couple of decades, but actually longer, of the sort of middle duration of a couple hundred years. What are the narrative and formal historians' tools that we can use to tell those stories? So, yes.
So, first I'm going to just say something that I forgot to say, because of the literary focus here. One of the exciting programs that we've had over the years is called Opening Night, and it's the creative writing faculty reading their works. So That's not exactly related to your question. But I would say that when we first did the Drucker process, we talked a lot to people about what our special role should be, and a lot of people pulled me aside and said that they didn't think our starring role would be using the campus for direct research, because the research in a lot of the sciences is going more molecular and things, and if you're going to do cutting edge research, it might not be on the campus site. But they thought we could have a very, very special role in helping students learn to do research and getting experience. So as this concept of a living museum and sharing, a lot of the research has been more about pedagogy and things like that. Like Diane Ullman, who does the Art Science Fusion, writes in entomology journals about teaching, and involving students in that. So our bent has been more about, the teaching side of things, and including teaching students about research and experiencing that.
A couple of other things I think about too. One is I hear in the Office of the Vice President for Research in the Student Research Program often how challenging it is to place undergraduates in a research setting in the humanities, that they can easily move into labs when they're working with scientists. But if you go to the surf fairs, that we had one just a couple of days ago, you will not see many historians. There are historians because they can go into archives. But other than the history undergrads, you just don't see many undergraduates. And I just think about both of these projects, the way they provide undergraduates with a true research project, where they are themselves creating knowledge and learning the forms and practices. I also think if we imagine that the majority of our undergraduates are not going on to be graduate students and PhD students, but want to do other things, what we would conceive of as research with and for undergraduates would suddenly get a lot more capacious, because it doesn't have to be one thing. The other thing that strikes me is there are new book series like the one I co-edit. There's a brand new journal called Public Humanities out of University of Oxford Press, where those of us in academe are trying to provide platforms that treat the work we've been hearing about as serious scholarship, different and serious scholarship. And it's taking an adjustment for the academy to grasp that. But I really think that there are more and more venues to share this work, which is serious discovery work. And then it's so important for those of us in this room who are faculty, when we are reviewing our colleagues, to educate their departments about the value of that work as research.
Just to build on that, do you co-publish with your students? That's great, because the sciences have that wrapped up, And I think, I noticed when I was at Colby College how kids would graduate with degrees in biology and have 2 or 3 publications on their CV, and kids would graduate with degrees, in cultural studies or French, and they would have no, we got to catch up in that way. So it's great that that's providing an opportunity.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Kathleen, you mentioned well-being. I'm Fred Meyer with Backyard Abundance nonprofit here in Iowa City, and you mentioned well-being in the landscape. And I'm curious, you mentioned Nature Nooks as one of the projects that was going on at UC Davis. Can you tell us more about the projects that increase the health of students and the landscape simultaneously? What were some of the more successful ones, and what made them a success?
So this concept of Nature Nooks it's not that maybe as grand as you might think, but it's, a college campus has a lot of focus on the big buildings, and the, we were talking about this yesterday, the outside area is just kind of an afterthought. Maybe they don't have any money, and so people have been coming to us like, especially during COVID, can't we have an outdoor space that feels good? And so we have a Good Life Garden, which is one of our gateway gardens, with the Robert Mondavi Institute for Food and wine science. And UC Davis is a big viticulture and enology school because we're just 45 minutes from Napa. And so they have a beautiful garden, and they're all about their vineyard, and they have an olive oil center. We just we have beautiful trees. Can we do an outdoor area that's really where we can enjoy being outdoors? So we worked with them. They raised the money for the outdoor tables and chairs, and we got really nice things. But anyway, that's just an example, and it's harder than you think on a university campus. We were talking about that yesterday, to do nice outdoor areas. So we've been trying to work on those with departments and try to get more of those. But the other big thing we're doing is working with the Campus Nature RX network, which is out of Cornell, and we've been part of that whole movement of trying to have people recognize the research that shows how important nature is to people's health and well-being. And so we've done a lot of programs with that, and we finally just got the prescriptions. I wasn't sure that UC Davis, being a big, formal medical school, would go for those, mental health prescriptions, but they're very into it now. So is that enough of an answer? Of course, our gardens, we try to create as many gardens as possible, and that's what the students really love. But it's these giant buildings that don't have any outdoor spaces is what we're trying to focus on now.
Yeah, I was going to say, you both, common thing, you both have rivers that nobody loves running through that you're working on, right? And I think that we talk a lot about engaging or activating the Iowa River that comes through campus. And I'll be honest, I don't love, to see it because it's so degraded, and it's a space that you walk over to get to the west side of campus but don't engage. And we've talked about activating it. How do you actually make people, because at UC Davis, it was the back door of the university, and you made it the front door. How do you change that mindset that enables investment? Because you have to cast a vision and say it's going to look like this, and we have not a ton of money to do it all at once, and you've gotten there. How do you get people to say that, no, maybe it's worth doing something about this that doesn't involve long-range plans and big money that you can't have immediately when no one sees the vision?
Well, when I talked about that Drucker process, the consultant who worked with us said, don't mention the waterway, or just tell people, we know the waterway is terrible. We need you to talk about other things, and we're going to work on that. Because he said, because it would get algae, and it's just horrible. And the professors who specialize in water quality are like, we're embarrassed to bring people to campus. And it was right there in the middle of everything. So they said, just don't, so that's how bad it was. And so one of the first things we did was to convince the campus to hire a waterway steward, because they said it's the only part of campus that's not stewarded. It was just a flood control thing. So I showed you the pictures. We hired a waterway steward, and then she built her waterway stewardship team. And so, because there used to be trash floating out there and everything, so the first step was just kind of to try to take care of it. We had numerous attempts with committees to try to figure out how to make it work. And then we have a person on our team, when we combined across the campus, there's a person who's with the riparian area of the campus, and he knew all about river systems. So he asked for $500, and he did an experiment, and he videotaped it. He took a portion of the water, and he thought, he said, when you go out on a natural stream, it's going to move a little bit. It's going to have rocks and things. So he created these, he got in the water, terrible water, and he made these little weirs, and then he videotaped it, and in just a very short while, it cleaned up the water. Mm-hmm. And so then we got an investment from campus for the first phase, and then we were able to show that experimental phase working, and that's how we moved up to the $5.4 million grant for the rest of the, so that's kind of how we did it. But the funny thing was, this Gateways project got everyone's attention. It just somehow, so one of these very entrepreneurial business school professors came to me and said, I want my graduate school to work on the Gateways project and come up with analog ideas. So for a whole quarter, they did that. And when they got to the presentation, they said, first of all, you know, because they're all business students, they're all dressed up. No. We think there's one thing you should understand, Kathleen. You have waterfront property, and waterfront property is valuable. And so they created all these ideas, like along the road there, the streets of Florence, and they had all these visions. And so anyway, 26 years later, we're finally doing it. I never thought I would see it be done, you know, because even, you know, the archives, I've read the archives on the history of the Arboretum, and chancellor after chancellor just bemoaned the fact that it was like because it's a stagnant area, it's not a flowing creek anymore. And so anyway.
Time. What time is it? Oh, it is 3. We are actually overtime because I have been fascinated. So first, thank you all for coming. I so appreciate, as someone pointed out, the wonderful community of people in the room. I can't wait to hear the ideas that the teams are going to bring to the workshop on Friday, and I hope you'll come to the workshop as inspired as I will, thanks to these 2 wonderful guests.